Gonna build a mountain from a little hill.
Evening folks, this is Best in Slot with a Planet Zoo update video. Now we've got a couple of weeks worth of stuff to cover, but some exciting stuff has been unveiled just in the last day or so, so we're going to get started on all of that, including some information about poop. So, you know, get excited. Anyways, the first news revealed about a week ago now, so we're going to go through this a little bit quicker, was the announcement of this little fellow. Well, I say little, he's a big boy. Frontier announced the Galapagos tortoise via their Twitter in honour of World Turtle Day, and we got a nice big video of him in action. This may actually be the best look we've had at any animals in the game in their in-game form. The chunky boy looks great with his slow and ponderous movement, and I particularly like the way his tongue moves sort of individually from the rest of his mouth. Not in a fetish kind of way, it's just a neat animation. As I say, the tortoise was revealed quite a while ago, so I don't really want to spend too long talking about it, but it's just really nice to have a look at an animal via an actual in-game animation. All we've had so far are those little headshots on Twitter and the CGI trailer, but what we have here is a real look at what our own tortoises are going to look like in our own parks, and it looks awesome. The second new animal was spotted as part of the Zookeeper Zone. This is a weekly newsletter sent out to people that sign up that shows off new animals, features, updates on the game, and just general stuff like that. The animal was this, an Indian peafowl, something we've had confirmation of in the past via in-game articles, but this time we get an actual look at it, and it looks weird. The peafowl actually caused a little bit of a stir when it was discovered yesterday because of the low render and texture quality of the model. As someone said on the subreddit, they thought it was from the 2013 Zoo Tycoon game. Thankfully, Bo was on hand to clear things up and just a couple of hours ago said the following. Good job spotting the Indian peafowl in our Zookeeper Zone yesterday. Some of you might have noticed the quality, and it was indeed a low-res shot that went out as it was a newsletter exclusive. Apologies for that! Exclamation point. With regards to the beautiful creature itself, I'd just like to remind you that the game is currently in development, and not all shots you see are final. The authenticity of all animals in Planet Zoo is incredibly important to us, and the model is still being worked on. Thank you for your continued feedback. We are always listening and taking it on board and help feed into the development of the game. Unsurprisingly then, the low quality of the peafowl is likely temporary, giving us a fun reveal for people who follow the newsletter as opposed to the high quality reveal that the likes of the Galapagos tortoise got. It is a little bit odd to include an unfinished creature as part of the newsletter, but given the exceptional quality of every other animal we've seen so far, it's in no doubt at all that what Bo is saying is true, and that by the game comes out, this feathery fellow should be a lot higher quality. It's always worth keeping in mind that Planet Zoo is likely 4-5 months away from release. That's quite a long time. A lot is likely to change between now and then, and everything we see, even content that does come directly from Frontier, should be taken with some delicious Himalayan pink salt, which everybody assured me was their favourite type. All that said, if we ignore the quality of the peafowl itself, then this shot actually shows us some pretty bloody exciting stuff, and some stuff we speculated on in the past. This peafowl is clearly standing in the park itself. It doesn't look like it's an exhibit. There's a fountain to the left along with a glass building of some form, and low bushes that it would easily be able to escape from. What this suggests, and remember the pink salt, is just that like in most modern zoos, the peafowls may indeed be able to wander around with our guests without them freaking out. Many zoos have peafowl wandering around because it's exciting for the guests, and they're generally speaking very placid animals that don't harm anyone. Generally speaking. They're also unlikely to escape. They're basically the Dryosaurus of modern zoos. It's such a staple in those zoos that I'd be a shame if it wasn't a feature, so I'm really glad it appears that they've gone in that direction. With the two new animals out of the way, we can shift our attention to the developer journal that was put online a few days ago on the Tuesday. I'm going to link it down below if you haven't seen it for yourselves. You should, but I'll give you the Cole's notes right here anyway. First up, we have some talk about how animals will react to social needs and weather. It's interesting, but nothing we didn't already know about. That's followed up with some new information on our animal feed, however, as senior designer David Bamber says the following. Food quality is another thing you'll want to take into account, as it improves the nutritional welfare of your animals. You can research better quality foods for each species, but this will carry an increased cost, so it's up to you to decide if it's worth it. Higher welfare animals have the potential to live longer, raise young more successfully, and be more appealing to guests. Now, I don't believe we knew for sure that food quality was going to be a factor, and we certainly didn't know that we'd be researching better foods for each individual species. That sounds like a lot of research. Is it really individual to each species, or is it, say, better big cat feed, better bird feed, so on, so on? We're going to have to wait and see, but I love huge research trees, so either way I'm going to be on board. It seems that the balancing act between animal welfare and the increased funds that will eventually bring to your park, and your current bills and earnings, your staff bills and stuff like that, is going to be a pretty delicate balance. In theory, you want to give your animals the best possible welfare from the get-go, but that's unlikely to be possible in a beginner zoo, especially when you first bring those animals in. Whilst I could see that upsetting some people, it's also a pretty necessary gameplay mechanic if they're going to have any difficulty in the game whatsoever. Looking after animals with limited resources should be important. Maybe instead of bringing in a new species, you could research things to look better after the ones you already have. Those small choices are kind of what build up to become like satisfying gameplay loops, basically. After that, there's a little bit of talk about one-way glass and animal shyness. Again, stuff we've heard before, but if you want a refresher, you can always go check the article down below. It really is interesting, I recommend checking it out. But moving on from that, we do get some brand new information on animal behaviours, thanks to programmer Megan Brown. She says the following: a vast amount of research has gone into all our systems. One in particular I would definitely highlight is the mating system, specifically who will mate with who. In real life, animals have hugely varied mating habits, ranging from pure monogamy, one-on-one partnership, sometimes for life, like lobsters, to polygamy, and seemingly no mating rules at all. The dream. In Planet Zoo, we have attempted to match our mating rules to be as close as possible to their real-life counterparts. To give some examples, for West African lions, only the alpha male will be allowed to mate with the females in his pride, whereas reticulated giraffes will mate with any member of the opposite sex. Now, we've thought for quite a while that conservation, proliferation of species, and therefore mating was going to be a very important part of Planet Zoo, and the rather staggering amount of detail put into those systems really seems to back that up. I can't remember playing a zoo game, or hell, even an animal game, where animals had specific mating habits dependent upon their species. Not only does it make your parks and exhibits much more interesting, but again it leads to interesting gameplay decisions, as all parts of a game really probably should. Having your alpha male Western African lion being the only male allowed to breed is interesting on paper, it's interesting to look at. Also ties into the systems the game has, wherein incest and shallow gene pools lead to problems for your animals. Potentially then, when your alpha lion has, done his thing, it may be beneficial to ship him off back into the wild and bring in a new male to compete for the alpha spot and therefore keep the gene pool moving. The lions will compete for the alpha slot, but if you've got one that's kind of dominating, then maybe you're going to have to get rid of him. Conversely, reticulated giraffes like to get around a little bit, so those gene pools will probably be a little bit easier to manage. It's an interesting system that, even if it doesn't go much deeper than this, is already a step above what we've seen so far, generally speaking. Before the final part I want to specifically spend time on, there's notes about how animals will properly observe their environments and have different attention spans. Some animals, you'd assume elephants and the like, will move slower. They're going to look around less, probably pay less attention in general, whereas birds and typical prey animals are probably going to seem more alert. The article even mentions how juveniles will have different head movements to adults. It's pretty cool. Some stuff on socialization we already knew, and then finally, but definitely not least, the dung. Our last piece of information comes from David again. Before we go, I don't think we can talk about animal behaviour without talking about dung. It's always a fun aspect to work on. My YouTube recommendations list is now very specific. Poor guy. We've tried to pay special attention to the size, shape, number of boli in a pile, and frequency compared to eating rates. We wanted to make sure this vital aspect of zookeeper work is properly represented, and some animals will need extra keepers simply to keep up with the volume of dung. I'm looking at you, elephants. We know from our conversations with keepers that this less glamorous side of animal care is time consuming, but is absolutely vital to keeping them fit and healthy. By the way, every piece of dung is a physics object that rolls downhill. Now I'm going to spare you multiple photos of animal dung in the background. I know, I'm too nice to you guys, but this is definitely worth talking about, because even if you find the system needlessly grandiose, which I don't personally, then at the very least it shows the insane level of detail and attention being paid to the animals in this game above all else. From unique personalities, to species-specific breeding patterns, to yes, the size, shape and frequency of dung from our animals. And once again, this isn't detail for detail's sake. Yes, it makes our animals more realistic and stuff, but as David says, you'll have to assign more zookeepers to certain animals to keep up with the sheer volume of dung they're going to put out. That, again, is the details, the things that make these animals interesting, feeding back into the gameplay loops and the decisions you're going to have to make whilst playing the game. Even if all of the ones I've mentioned seem minor, you bring them together and they form a more complex and interesting system. Well, hopefully, anyway. Also, each piece of dung is its own thing. It'll move, it'll roll downhill, it'll hopefully be kicked around by animals if they knock into it. I'm seeing a lot of screenshots and videos themed around this topic. Anyway, that's it from me folks. Galapagos tortoise, peafowls, breeding preferences, food quality and dung. The big five. Somehow. I apologise that this video was a little bit later than I wanted it to be. You know, it's been a couple of weeks since the tortoise, but I didn't really want to do a video on just the tortoise. I figured it'd be better to wait until we had a little bit more information to discuss, and the peafowl stuff only came out yesterday and even today. If you disagree with that and you'd like more common updates, then feel free to let me know in the comments down below, and if a lot of people do, then I can definitely handle it a little bit differently in the future. Either way, a lot of new and exciting information here, and as June is about to begin and the gameplay reveal at E3 is in 10 days time on the 10th of June, we should be expecting a lot more information very soon. If you enjoyed this video, please consider throwing me a like down below and a subscription if you're new to the channel, and I'll see you lovely folks next time. Cheers myself as always, bye bye. Hey folks, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and you want to help support me a little bit more, you can do so at patreon.com/bestinslot. There's a link in the description down below. Every little really does help in times like these, but it's not at all expected, and by just watching the video you've already helped me out massively, and it makes you a pretty cool person, so well done you. Thanks for joining me either way, I'll see you next time.